in the black community for a black officer, you don't fit in either community. You're looked upon as you're one of them now. You're a police officer. You can no longer be in the black community.
All right, Chief Nelson, thank you very much for joining me.
No problem.
You have quite an interesting story. You have many stories over your many years of service. You have a unique perspective kind of on both sides of a very important issue here. So if you could just give us some background on your story, how you came to be, and what your perspective on the different issues are.
Okay. I'm a retired Oklahoma City police officer for 32 and a half years. I currently work here at Oklahoma City University as the chief of police. And I got into law enforcement in 1987. I didn't originally want to be a police officer or thought I was going to be a police officer. I wanted to be an astronaut. My math was not to the caliber that it needed to be an astronaut. So I was going into engineering. And in high school, I had won a contest in engineering. I went to Votech, and I had some scholarships waiting for me. So coming out of high school, one of the options I took up was to go to have an internship. And I was given interviews, or I was giving interview dates and schedules to attend. Going to those interview dates and schedules, I was met in the face smartly by racism. I'd go to my interview, I'd sit through the interview, never get interviewed, and then I'd be told I could leave at the end of the day. That happened at 3 different major drafting firms in Oklahoma City. Finally, one group of gentlemen called me into their conference room after I asked a few questions, and they told me that, we're not going to be the first firm to hire a black man or a black person, that the industry is not ready for that. This is in 1983. So they said, the industry is not ready for a black man in drafting. We're not going to be the first company to hire a black man and be drummed out of this business or laughed at. And so that told me I was not going to make it in engineering as well. So what turned me toward law enforcement was at OSU in Oklahoma City, in the drafting room, which was downstairs facing the south. You looked out over the police academy, and I saw people out there running, doing their drills and different things. And I worked at a grocery store at the time, and we would kind of play police at the grocery store. When somebody would come in with a bogus check, shoplifter, we would tackle them, chase them down, tie them up with your apron. Police would come pick them up. We'd turn them over. Had an incident that happened there where we had codes for the different crimes that would occur, and somebody put out the wrong code for a bogus check writer when it was an armed robbery. And I chased down an armed robbery guy. I didn't chase him, he was walking. I ran up to him, me and another guy, and tried to tackle him, only for him to turn and put a .45 caliber semi-automatic to my head.
Wow. And
I thought I was going to die that day. And when I got up off the ground from praying, he was gone. And so I was kind of doing law enforcement before I got in law enforcement. So I kind of made the decision to go into law enforcement, and that kind of goes back to being raised by my grandparents. We would travel when I was a little kid to different church revivals. And back then in the 70s and the early 80s, there was a lot of racism still going on. And, my grandparents would tell me that, if you ever get stopped by the police, I got to talk from my grandparents, not even my mom or my dad. But keep your hands where they can see them, do exactly what they tell you to do, don't argue, yes sir, that kind of thing, and then we'll deal with it later, make a complaint. And so we would get stopped going to these church revivals, driving on the back roads, because you get stopped by the police if you're on the main roads, and you would literally get harassed. But even on some of the back roads, I remember getting stopped and them making us get out of the car and tossing the car, pulling the seats out. You'd always have food with you to travel because you're going to a church revival. You're going to eat, you're going to bring food. Toss the food out in the ground, make us lay down on the dirt road, gravel roads. And then when they would leave, they would spin out and throw dirt all over us when they would leave. And get up, dust yourself off, put stuff back in the car, and go on. And so I had talked with my grandfather about different things growing up, and he would always say, leave things better than you found them. If you can improve upon them, don't let it appear that you were there to have done anything negative to it. One of those conversations was about, if you want to make a change, sometimes you have to get involved. And just a lot of things happened in my life after high school that caused me to go into law enforcement. The things I wanted to do, I was being hit with dead ends.
And specifically because of your color of your skin.
And a lot of them were specifically because of the color of my skin. And so I remember what my grandfather told me in that drafting room, not having gotten an internship after winning second place in a state competition for drafting, and being told you had a guaranteed job, and now that was going away. And so watching them do their drills and stuff, and knowing that I'm in a dead-end job that I'm learning that I haven't even gotten into yet, and I thought, I've had all these negative things happen to me in law enforcement. My grandfather said sometimes you got to join to make a difference. I thought, what things in life will never go away? People got to eat. I don't want to work in the food industry. People are going to die. I didn't want to work in the undertaking industry. And people are going to cause problems with other people. We're always going to need cops. So I thought, oh my gosh, but I know what they do and how they are. It sure would be great if that would change. So I thought, well, why not me? So I took a stab at joining the police department. Lo and behold, to my amazement, I got hired right off the bat. Oklahoma City at the time was in a little bit of a crisis. It had been brought to their attention they didn't have enough African Americans working on the police department. Everybody on the police department was white. So they had a push to hire females and people of color. Didn't matter what color, just color. And so there was this big push to hire minorities and females. And I came in not knowing that around the right time and got hired. Now, they didn't hire people that weren't qualified. You still had to go through the same test. Matter of fact, I think sometimes they made them harder, the physical test. But I got hired and went through the training, and I made it my mission that I remembered things that had happened to me as a kid, that I was going to make things better and try to equal the playing field. There's an incident I told you about where I was in high school. I was coming home, and I got stopped by the police coming out of a 7-Eleven. They pointed guns at me and flashlights. I couldn't tell what was going on. I had a burrito, my donuts, and my icy. It's 11 o'clock at night. That's my dinner.
Right. As I recall from the first time you told me the story, when they first tried to apprehend you, they told you conflicting commands. Some of them said freeze.
While the lights are in my face and guns are pointing. I come out of the store and there's so many flashlights shining at me, I can't even see the police cars or the officers. I just hear, get your hands up, get on the ground, don't move, and all these different statements being yelled at me. And so I'm like, okay, do I get on the ground? Do I put my hands up? Or do I just stand here and not move? And they're getting closer and closer and closer, so making it harder and harder to see. So finally I decided, maybe I'll just get down. So I started to set my drink and my icy, my donuts and my burrito there on the trunk of the car lid. And as I'm starting to do that, I get hit from behind and slammed down to the ground. Now, I'm coming from a grocery store. I just gotten off. So back then, it's in the 80s, late 80s, about mid 80s. I'm wearing a white shirt, a tie, and some khaki slacks, like the guy on the insurance commercial. I'm wearing khakis. And they put me down on the ground in the parking lot next to my car in a 7-Eleven parking lot. So what's on the ground in front of 7-Eleven stores where people park? Oil from leaking cars. So they put me in an oil puddle. And they handcuffed me, knees on my back and everything, picked me up, shoved me in the car. And all this time, I'm thinking what my grandfather said. Just cooperate, don't say anything, do exactly what they say, don't give them a reason to do anything. I'm trying to do exactly what they say, put me in the car. But now nobody's talking to me. And I'm wondering, okay, eventually somebody's going to tell me what happened and what's going on. But nobody's talking to me. Officer asks me my name, date of birth, where I live, where I'm coming from, where I'm going. I tell him. Then he stops talking to me. He gets out of the car, and then I notice officers are starting to leave. Now, this is the Oklahoma City Police Department, the same one I joined. I noticed that officers are leaving, and finally it's me and one other officer, and me and this officer and another officer. And I asked him, he tells me to get out, turn around, pushes me over the hood of the car, starts taking the handcuffs off. And he tells me, okay, you can go. I'm like, okay, sir, can I ask a question? What? I said, what did I do? Because nobody ever told me. But I'm like, what did I do? He says, what do you mean? I said, I mean, I just came out of the store. I don't know what's going on. What did I do wrong? And he said, well, you fit the description of a suspect we're looking for. He said, someplace had gotten robbed. They were looking for a white over a black car, and it was a black male. And I was driving a black over white Pontiac Grand Prix, 1969 model. And I was black. So I guess I fit the description. I had no idea. But I did exactly what they told me to do, which was, turns out, the smart, right thing to do. Had I tried to contest them at that time, knowing that I did nothing wrong, I could have gotten shot. I could have gotten beaten up or any number of different things, but I didn't know what was going on, so I just did whatever they told me to do. I grew up with a healthy fear of the police. I've got a brother that's not always been on the right side of the law, and I've seen him come home with injuries, sometimes from fights he got into and sometimes from the police. And I knew that officers had sometimes a propensity to be a little heavy-handed, especially if you were a darker complexion. So, and like I say, the talks with my grandfather, you do what they tell you to do. So I got through that. And then over the years and the other incidents of racism that I experienced, and hearing my grandfather in my head, I thought, you know, I'm gonna join the police department. I mean, they won't let me be an architect. I'm not smart enough to be an astronaut. So let me do that. They're gonna always need cops. And like I said, lo and behold, they hired me without much of an issue. And I got in the police academy, and it was like, it almost seemed like from the day I got in the police academy that they were trying to make me quit with the things they did to you. I've since learned that, well, they were doing that to everybody.
So what are some examples of that?
Well, like, you break a person down and then you have to build them back up. So it was an intentional process. It was kind of like the military. You make it really hard because when you get out on the street, sometimes it's really hard. And they wanted to know who was going to quit. I mean, you weren't physically abused or anything, but they made it hard on you intentionally. They explained this to us much later on towards graduation, that we did this to you on purpose because you're going to have difficulties on the street. Everybody's not going to like you, and we need to know that you can make it and you can take it. And so since my career in the police department coming up, I continued to experience issues even as a police officer. So I can remember times where I'm in uniform, I'm working, I take my uniform off, I go home, and on the way home I might stop somewhere. It was either one of two different reactions. I either got no one asking me if I needed any help, but yet I would see them around. You know, loss prevention, you see the clerk, they're always within a few yards of you, but nobody ever comes over and asks you if they can help you with anything. I'd either get that, or I'd get more help than I needed. Can we help you with something? No, I'm just looking. Well, what are you looking for? I'm just looking. I'll know when I see it. Well, one, I help you. Are you looking for something for a man or for a woman? What can I help you for? What do you need? I mean, are you shopping or are you just looking? Because if you're just looking, you know, you can move on. I get too much service, and they want to stay with me until I buy something. And then they want to, I think I'm gonna get this. Okay, I'll take that. And I'll hold this up at the register for you. I get too much service. So it was like, I know what you're doing. I mean, I could pick out the loss prevention people because they would be the people I'd see all the time in the store. They're not coming up to me and asking me if they can help me. I just always see them in the area.
What about in uniform? What kind of discrimination did you face from your own community for being a police officer?
It's kind of unique for a black person in law enforcement. You're what's considered in the community as an Oreo. Black on the outside, but consider it white on the inside, or blue.
Or what was that?
Or blue.
Blue.
Yeah, because there's a mentality with police. Sometimes once you join the department, you go through training. Now you're one of us. You're part of the blue line. And police departments have had the mistaken ideology of sometimes an us against them mentality, where it's us, we maintain order, we protect, we guard, and it's them, those who commit crimes and that type of thing. It's leaning more towards now a guardian type mentality where we have to guard and protect. But in the black community, for a black officer, you don't fit in either community. You're looked upon as you're one of them now. You're a police officer. You can no longer be in the black community. White officers don't face that. A lot of times families will celebrate a white officer being a police officer. My mother tried to talk me out of it. She would rather I had gone to the military. And we were in a war in Afghanistan at the time. She would rather I had joined the military than to join the police department. But yeah, black officers catch it from the community, all communities, black community, white community, and sometimes at work. Because just because I was in uniform didn't mean I didn't face racism at work from some of my peers. There were people that didn't want me around, didn't think I needed to be there. They didn't always come out and say it, but you could tell by the body language and the non-inclusion that you're offered and that type of thing. So it's been around in uniform, out of uniform.
And in today's climate, I'm sure it's probably worse than in recent memory with all the protests going on that seem to pit the black community against the police community. How do you feel that that's made the problems you faced?
Yes and no. I mean, people are more outspoken now about how they feel. It seems like people are more sensitive about things. People are more inclined to want people fired for the smallest thing, especially in law enforcement. But what people got to understand is there's people involved in law enforcement. People that are going to make mistakes, and what you should be trying to look for is the character of an individual, and weed out those people who don't have character, don't have. You can train almost anybody, but it's difficult to weed out the biased in individuals and hatred, because people can hide that. And so what departments need to look for in their hiring is the character, the characteristics of an individual, the morale of an individual. Every black officer I know has had an issue with the black community, an opposition to them knowing that they're law enforcement.
What do you think could help that? There seems to be more inclusion of the black community is what's needed. People.
Well, police departments need more ethnicity, and it's a double-edged sword. So police departments need to hire more people of color. And people of color are more resentful of law enforcement. So they'll complain that there's not enough black cops out there, but then they'll try to discourage black people from being cops. And it's more so in the black community than I think any others. We right now we're hiring Hispanics at a very high rate, and Hispanic families are not so much like that. They're encouraging Hispanics to join the police department. I don't know too many African American families that encourage their kids to try to be cops. Black cops usually arrive at that decision in an uncharacteristic way compared to white cops. White officers will tell you a lot of times, I wanted to be a police officer since I was a kid. You don't often hear that from a black officer. It's like, you will on occasion, but I think a lot of black officers arrive at the decision or arrive at having become a police officer in a different way. Either wanting to make a difference, wanting to change the way things are. That's not to say that there aren't, black officers who want to be like Dad because he was a cop or he was an agent or something like that. That still exists, but I think by far that happens more in white families where I want to be a cop since I was a little kid. We all play cops and robbers and bad guys and good guys and that kind of thing. But you quickly learn, most people of color, you quickly learn that there's obstacles. There's things that I will have to overcome if I go that route. And you lose a lot of friends, black and white alike. Anybody that decides to become a police officer is going to lose friends. And some will lose family. There will be people you can no longer associate with and hang out with because of your job. But it seems like black officers and officers of color are losing more when they decide to go into law enforcement. But I think we need more people of color in law enforcement, because law enforcement is supposed to be a reflection of society. And the only way to balance it is to get more people involved in it.
And so in light of the recent tragedies like George Floyd's death and the many other cases that are coming up pretty much weekly, where we see instances of brutality, or so-called brutality is perceived as brutality in some cases. In some cases there's more to the story. In some cases it's pretty clear-cut that there's misuse of force. What do you think on the side of the public and on the side of the police could be done to try and mitigate that?
Well, every case that you see or have heard about on TV, on the internet, could have been avoided. And in every case I've seen or heard of, I've seen mistakes, typically on both sides, the police and the public, the person that they contacted. I've seen some instances where the person that was contacted, that the incident happened to, did nothing wrong. And it was completely on the part of the police, the mistakes.
I think Breonna Taylor is a perfect case of that, where completely it was the police's fault. It was total tragedy.
They had a lot of things they did wrong there. But then I've seen some other cases, a lot of them, where the officers are simply reactionary. They're reacting to what that person did. And a lot of what law enforcement is nowadays is reactionary, because the public doesn't want us to be proactive. They don't, because of things that happen in New York and all that, stop and frisk and all that. They don't want police officers stopping because they think it's random. But you have to have a reason to stop and detain and talk to somebody. If you don't, that person can walk away. Now, police officers and departments sometimes have taken advantage of that, because you don't know what they know. You don't know what information that the officer's working with. You don't know if you actually fit the description of somebody or if they're making it up. So in some cases, I think that has been taken advantage of. But all in all, there's mistakes that I have seen on both sides. Like I said, sometimes the police are making more of the mistakes, and sometimes the person that they're dealing with is making more of the mistakes, causing that officer to have to react. And then that reaction ends up leading to a death.
So, but generally, what would you say are some concrete actions that the public could take to reduce these incidences? What could the police do to reduce these incidences?
Well, everybody keeps talking about training for the police, defunding the police, changing this and changing that. They need more of this, they need more of that. But nobody's ever talked about the other side of the coin. There's always two sides of the coin on every one of these incidents. There's the person the police are dealing with, and there's the police. It's like my grandfather told me when I was a kid. If you do have some control of the situation, matter of fact, you as the defendant or the person who is being stopped, you have more control over the incident than you think you have, because the officers have to be reactionary to you. So if you decide to run, guess what? They're going to chase you. If you decide to fight, they're going to fight you. If you decide to just comply and answer their questions, what are they going to do? They're supposed to not do anything other than talk to you. So your best position is to cooperate and comply. If you cooperate and comply, you're not giving them any reason to have to use force, because we're reactionary and our training tells us what to do at certain times and different moments. When you resist, even when you're talking back, and people think I'm complying because I'm not doing anything, but when the officer's telling you to put your hands behind your back and you're not doing it, that's a refusal. You're not doing anything, but you're actively resisting by not putting your hands behind your back. So he's left with only one thing to do when you refuse to do what he tells you to do. That's to physically touch you and manipulate you into the position he wants you into. So when the officer tells you to put your hands behind your back and you think in your mind, I haven't done anything wrong, I'm not going to do that. Well, you don't know what information he's working with. He may be investigating something that he thinks you're the suspect. We don't know. So the easiest thing to do is comply, cooperate, and ask him to explain once he feels comfortable with you being handcuffed, or once this deal is over, you can ask questions at that point. But when you refuse and you don't cooperate, you give him the authority to do more. So by not putting your hands behind your back when I tell you to, and I tell you over and over and over and over again, I'm left with only one answer. I have to make you do it. And then you're going to resist, which is going to give me more authority to use force. So the more you resist me telling you something, the more authorization under the law that you give me to use more force.
So let me set up a hypothetical for you to kind of explore a different part of this. Let's take you back to when you were a young Dexter Nelson. Let's say you hadn't gotten the talk from your grandfather. You didn't know what the wise thing to do.
If I had done like a lot of kids nowadays and I ran.
Or even just passively resist. Even if you just felt so much indignation because you knew you were doing anything wrong and wrong was being done to you, that you just didn't want to comply. You can understand why from their perspective.
I totally understand it. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not doing that. You have no right to touch me. You have no authority. I get that. I understand that. But again, you don't know what the officer's working with. So had I done that, had I been that person and I resisted, I probably would have gotten hurt. Because I've talked to kids nowadays, the natural instinct for a lot of kids, regardless of race, when they see the police now, is to run. That's the absolute worst thing you can do. Because the cliche says, if we have to chase you, we're bringing an ass whooping with you. And if people have to chase you and you don't stop, they have to use force to stop you. So we're reactionary. We react to what you do. So if you choose to run, I got to chase you. You don't choose to stop, now I got to stop you. You don't allow me to handcuff you without force, I got to use force to handcuff you. There's a great potential for you getting hurt. And at any time during this altercation, if I think in my mind that you're doing something to hurt me, I can use more force. Because this is the same for the general public. If you're involved in a shooting, say for instance somebody breaks into your house, you're at home asleep, somebody breaks into your house, you hear the glass break, and you open up your bedroom door and you look and there's a guy, a shadowy figure at the end of the hall. And you tell them, get out of my house. And that shadowy figure doesn't respond to you by getting out of your house. What's the next thing you do?
Use force.
You're going to try to use some kind of force.
But I think there's an important difference here that person put himself in a circumstance where I'm in danger. So the more impetus is on me to protect myself and my family, where kind of the perspective on the street is that the police come up to the person, whether they are guilty or not. What is the kind of what legal obligation do the police have to tell the person that they're matched the description or whatever it is, whatever reason they have for detaining the person? What is the legal obligation on the police officers to?
Not much.
Not much. Ooh.
So, and the reason being is if I'm looking for a guy in a gray and white striped shirt, blue jeans, black hair, that sounds like you, and I have information that he's carrying a gun and he just robbed somebody around the corner, and I pull up, I'm not going to pull up and say, hey, I got an information, you just robbed somebody around the corner, can I talk to you? Because you're probably going to run. As soon as you think I know what you did, you're probably going to run or fight or pull your weapon. So what officers are trying to use is what best explanation will be a type of element of surprise. They're trying to get close enough to you and determine if you're that person before they let you know what's going on. And in most cases, training says to detain that person in handcuffs until you can figure out what's going on. So a lot of times that doesn't leave a lot of room for explanation, because we're in the heat of the moment. It's happening right now. I roll around the corner, I see a guy that looks like he fits the description. I immediately want to stop him and make contact. I've already called for backup. I pull up, and then your reaction is going to determine how this call goes. So I come around the corner, I see you, say, hey, can I talk to you for just a minute? You know you've done nothing wrong. You're just going home. You just want to get home. And you don't like the police. Nope, I'm just going home. No, I need to talk to you. I need you to stop. That's an indication that the officer probably has a little bit more, but you still don't know that. So you just keep going. No, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm going home. That's the exact same way suspects act that have done something. They use the stuff that's out there now about, I don't have to stop. You're violating my rights. I can't tell you how many times I've heard suspects say, I can't breathe, or you got your knee on me. All of the different things that you've heard in all of these different cases, they use that information. So I've come into contact with you. You don't want to be stopped. You've got the right in your mind not to be detained. The officer in his mind, I've got the right to detain them. I've got legal authority to detain them, but there's no time for me to explain that to you. And so don't expect the officer to say, hey, I'm investigating a robbery. You match the description of a guy. I need to talk to you. I need you to stop. You know you didn't do it. We still have people, even if the officer gave that explanation, they're going to argue, it's not me. He doesn't know that.
Right.
He doesn't know you, and you don't know him. So the best, the safest, and the fastest course of action is for you to comply with the officer, let him do whatever he needs to do exactly what he tells you to do, and explain to him after you're handcuffed, look, I just came from the store. I really don't like the police. I haven't done anything. At that time, he's probably going to explain to you 9 times out of 10, and if he doesn't, you got a real good complaint. If he doesn't explain to you once you're handcuffed and he feels that he's safe with you, because that's what he's looking for. He's looking for control and safety for you and for him. So the quicker he can get handcuffs on you, as easily as they go on, they can come off. Just because you get handcuffed doesn't mean you're under arrest. Now, depending on the situation, it's going to depend on how he approaches you. If he thinks you're armed, he may try to get you on the ground. So if an officer tells you, I need you to get on the ground, you need to get on the ground, because that's an indication he thinks you're armed and he's coming with some force. But if an officer just walks up to you and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? More than likely, he might not think you're armed. Talk to him. What can I do for you? If you know you've done nothing wrong, and this is how our minds think. Right. I know I've done nothing wrong. He's going to talk to me. He's going to, and this will be over that quick. But I've literally had situations where I'm looking for somebody, I see somebody, I might not even have a description.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a moment here. You laid out the theory of mind behind the police officers in these circumstances where they're just trying to do their job, right? But there is also the presumption of innocence, right?
And there exactly is.
Yeah, and there's more police interactions with the public than there are people in America, right? There's something like 375 million police interactions with Americans a year, right? So most of those are...
I would argue that because some of those were the same people.
Okay, that's an interesting point, but I don't know that deters the point I'm trying to make, because that actually points out that some people receive disproportionately unfair treatment from the police officers. But anyways, so most of the interactions with police and the public are of innocent people, right?
I wouldn't say innocent, and the reason I say that is biblically we're not all innocent.
Legally innocent.
I'll go there with you.
Okay, right. So I'm trying to paint the picture from the other perspective here, that the understanding why they would be angry, even if they are, in a shady situation, they're walking in the middle of the night, unless there's a curfew or something, it seems like that's something they're within their right to expect not to be harassed about. So what do you make of that from the perspective of the public?
I completely understand that, and I like the fact you said harassed, because that's the viewpoint that the public takes.
That's how it feels.
I'm being harassed because I'm being stopped. But the standpoint that police take, and it goes back and forth. Okay, we talked about stopping the same person. Okay, if there's crime in a particular area, people typically call the police. And we get told to go police this area because of the crime in that area. So invariably, you're going to stop more people. And sometimes you're going to stop the same people. This is where the difference between good policing and bad policing. Good policing is community-based policing.
Okay.
You don't just drive around the neighborhood. You get out and you talk to people and you get to know the people who live in the neighborhood. You don't just show up when something bad is going on. You might see somebody out gardening, you stop and say, hey, I'm Officer Nelson, how you doing? So you live here, right? Yeah, okay, well, I patrol your area. I just want to get to know you. So if I see you, you see me, you know what's going on. You had some burglaries in the area, so I'll be out here patrolling. So now I know that person lives there. So you're making a note of who lives where and who they are. They get to know you, you get to know them. So you're better prepared to police that area. If I don't do that as a police officer, I'm always in my car and I just take the calls, I don't know anybody in the area, I'm more apt to stop people, and it's going to feel like harassment because I don't know who you are. Okay, so when I stop that person and I'm talking to them, a lot of the interaction between the police and the public is based on attitude. And sometimes police have the attitude, sometimes the citizen has the attitude. Sometimes they both have an attitude. Again, mistakes happen on both sides of the issue. When the officer has the attitude, he usually comes across in a negative way from the get-go. It's his approach. And officers need to recognize their approach when they're stopping people, because it can get you one way or the other. Now, we know that we approach people, and regardless of what our approach is, sometimes the citizen has the attitude because they simply don't want to be bothered. They don't like the police, don't want to have nothing to do with the police. That's where when I say you need to understand cooperation is going to get you a long way. If people will cooperate, you'll be done with that much sooner. But the attitude issue is something that we need to address on both sides. Police need to be cognizant of their attitude when they make the approach. And the citizen, even though you might not like the police, he's trying to do his job, you don't want to be harassed and all that, just go along with it. And then once you're done, express yourself to him as he's finished and say, hey, look, this is my feelings. I'm sorry that I feel this way, but whatever. But we need to have some dialogue there. But just understand that on that initial approach, depending on the circumstances, the officer may have that attitude because it's based on information he's working on. And if it's not, then we have a problem with the officer.
Right.
That happens. I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't. It happens. But yeah, I totally understand somebody feeling harassed. But you have to take into consideration the circumstance in which the officer approaches you. If you have a successful career, you will only deal with less than 10% of the public. Because in most areas, probably about less than 8% of the public are the ones committing the crimes. And that's why you'll see some of the same people over and over again. You'll get to know who they are. And you'll see them again and again. What is Rodney doing out here at 2 o'clock in the morning? I know he doesn't work over here. He lives 5 blocks over, so what's he doing in this neighborhood? That kind of thing. You'll have those contacts. But even when an officer has information he's working with and he comes out with somewhat of an attitude on the contact, once he determines this is not who I'm looking for, everything's cool here, this is fine, that should be immediately followed with an explanation. Hey, I'm sorry, I was looking for a burglary suspect and the information came out, the gray shirt and the pants, man, it looked like you. So you might get stopped by another cop, but I'm gonna let them know that you're walking over here and you're cool, but you might get stopped again because you do fit the description. You know, they should do that and explain things to you. Like when I got stopped in the 7-Eleven parking lot, nobody explained nothing to me. They left. Had I not asked, hey, what did I do? They weren't going to explain. And that was Oklahoma City. They weren't going to explain anything to me. So that was one of the things that made me want to get into law enforcement, to tell them and to help explain and change this problem. Like my grandfather said, if you don't get involved, sometimes you have to get involved to make a difference, but you can't make a difference on the sideline.
Right.
And what a lot of people are doing in protesting and all that, they're involved, but they're involved on the other side. They're involved on the citizen side. I was there too, but then I made a conscious choice that I was going to get more involved in this to try to make a difference by getting in there.
The belly of the beast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which you can understand why that wouldn't be a common reaction a person would have. Now, young Dexter Nelson, when he was, after he faced that unfairness, what could he have done to feel any sort of justice about it?
I can tell you, after several contacts with law enforcement, I was pissed. I was so pissed I didn't know what to do. And on that occasion, I went home because they stepped on my donuts, they knocked over my icy, and they stepped on my burrito. My seats were laying out in the parking lot. My cassettes, back in the day, not CDs, but cassettes were laying out in the parking lot. Some of them had been stepped on. My car was immaculate. That's what I owned. I knew I took care of it. And now it was trashed. My icy was running down the back of my white paint. And I was pissed. So I went home, I sat in the dark in my room, and my mother was like, she came in, was like, turn on the light. What are you doing? Nothing. What's wrong? Nothing. What happened? And I proceeded to tell her what happened. She's like, so did you do anything? I'm like, nope, I didn't do anything. What do you want to do now? I said, don't want to talk about it. So I was mad. I was mad for a long time. But luckily I channeled it. I sat on it for a long time. I understand the anger. I understand the lashing out. But you have to have control.
Right.
Because, again, the police are reactionary. And if you react in the wrong way, all you're doing is giving them ammunition. You don't want to give somebody the rope, for lack of better terms, to hang you with. Okay? So,
but again, in the defense of the public is not trained professionals, and they're not pressure tested, they're not psychologically tested to deal with stress where the police are, right? So the impetus is on the police not to succumb to those natural instincts.
And I totally understand that. But if you're having a disagreement with somebody, in the law, you go to a court, you go to trial and that kind of thing. You don't do that on the street. If the police is the authority, and you're having a problem with this particular officer, there's mechanisms in place for that. There's complaints. You can file charges. You can do all kinds of things. But you make it worse, and you give that officer more authority to do something to you when you bite into your anger. When you're not taking me, I'm not letting you handcuff me, hold my hands. He has to use more force to try to get you under control until he can try to talk to you. So I know the public that hadn't gotten any training in this, and the talk is coming back. The talk went away for decades. The talk with your parents, mine was with my grandparents. It never was just a talk. It was more of a training, because you don't just do the talk and that's the end of it. It's a training, because being told to cooperate and comply is one thing, but you got to know how to do it. And a lot of people think they're doing it, and they're doing the exact wrong thing. It's like, I know I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm not going to do what he says. That's not the right thing to do. You have a much better complaint, and if it goes wrong, even a lawsuit, if you do the right things. So if you comply, get handcuffed, whatever, and they got the wrong person, or they use force that you don't think they should have used, or you think they violated your rights in any kind of way, when it's done, that's the time to make your complaint. And Oklahoma City, unlike a lot of other departments, has a Citizens Review Board. It's getting ready to get beefed up even more now. But we've had one. That Citizens Review Board can look at anything they want to look at. Oklahoma City investigates more uses of force than just about any other department in the country because of their classification of use of force. Now they're trying to get away from that as much to get more in line with the other departments, because they actually investigate a lot of stuff that takes a lot of time that could be directed in other areas. But if you do what the officer says and you still feel that they did you wrong, either the way they talked to you, the way they touched you, or whatever, then you ask for a supervisor. You tell him or her, I need you to call your supervisor. I want to make a complaint. They're supposed to call them. And if they don't, or you don't want to do it in front of them, you wait till they're gone. 911. Yeah, I need to make a complaint on an officer. I was just stopped. Could you have a supervisor meet me at this location? Or have them call me at this cell phone number. You make your complaint. Now, one of the things they've talked about is taking away the, what do they call it? The liability for police officers. I can't remember.
Qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity. They're talking about taking that away from officers, which will make it easier to sue a police officer. You'll have less people becoming police officers behind that finding, because typically the officer is covered by his department as long as he's doing his job. Once you step outside of that authority, then yeah, you're out there on your own. And whether you had qualified immunity or not, it goes away. So if they're going to take that away from the very get-go, you're going to have more officers being sued for frivolous reasons.
Gotcha. Well, so when you talked about your story of how you faced injustice with police, you went to kind of internalize it. You went silent. I think our society today is doing the opposite. We're becoming vocal, right? We're seeing all the injustices and we're becoming as vocal as possible. What do you think are some of the better messages being put out? What do you think are some of the worst messages being put out?
Well, the only way we're going to get any headway made is for people to start talking. And any message that is on either side, any message that is geared towards making the other side look bad, demonizing or villainizing the other side, is not going to be productive. So until police departments and people who want progressive change can decide to sit down and talk and actively listen to each other to come to a resolution, it's going to keep happening. And some departments have been willing to listen and some have not. But you got to have listening on both sides, because you have to be careful what you ask for. You know, we talk about defunding the police and taking away budgets and that kind of thing, doing away with militarized equipment and stuff like that. We talked earlier, we're in the summer right now. We've been lulled into the COVID-19 era, where we're trying to stay away from germs and that kind of thing. But right before all this happened, we had a mass of school shootings and workplace violence going on. And all of that equipment that they want to do away with now is what was being used then to save people's lives. Armored vehicles, shields, helmets, assault rifles, all of that stuff is used in those workplace violence and school shooting incidents to save people's lives, because the public is more heavily armed than the police department nowadays. I know people who have armored vehicles. I know some guys who own a tank. Now, it's got concrete in the barrel, but there's some guys who own a military Abrams tank. And you can buy those. You can buy an armored truck at the fairgrounds. You can go to the gun show and see large caliber weapons and military weapons, and the public has that stuff. So your police department has to at least try to keep up with what they have to police. And if you have people in society who have militarized weapons and armament and vehicles, and the police have none of that, if somebody decides to use that stuff, we can't really help you a whole lot. And we haven't had a school shooting, thank God, in a number of weeks.
We haven't had school in a number of weeks.
But as soon as schools start opening up and we start having people in mass quantities going places, expect that stuff to start right back up again. And, you know, like I say, you got to be careful what you ask for. The limitations that you put on the police department, no matter where it is, are the same limitations you're imposing upon yourself. Because the police only have the authority to detain the public and to do the things that they do because of the authority behind their badge. Now, if you lessen that authority and they can't do it, that's going to be less that you can't do. They changed gun laws to allow people to walk around and carry guns, and police can't ask you questions about them unless they have a call. And we talked about, you know, you hear Karen calling the police You know, the white lady calling the police on somebody for something that's not going on. Well, the reason that they don't make that, it is illegal for you to make a frivolous phone call, but to find a prosecutor that's going to prosecute somebody for making a call that got somebody in a bind like that, it's going to be difficult to find, because if you start prosecuting people because they called the police because they saw something, even though it was wrong, people are going to stop calling the police. And we're in a situation now where people don't call us enough. They see stuff happening, and I don't want to be a snitch, and they don't call us and tell us anything. But then when the crime goes up in their area, well, the police aren't doing their job. Well, the police is an extension of the public. We just have a little bit more authority than they do. And if you can't work with the public and you're not communing with the public to get to know them, and then the two aren't working cohesively together, you have crime in those areas.
Right. Well, just to loop back to the militarization of the police for a bit, I mean, you can understand the kind of the optical spookiness of it, right? That, I mean, it looks scary to see, you know, walls.
And I'll tell you this, is I've been really disappointed with a lot of what I've seen with police departments when protesters come out and things are happening and they roll out that equipment. That's too much of a show of force. Nothing's happened. I understand you're trying to get prepared and get ready for it. You can get prepared and get ready for things and not have all that show of force out there. But the deal is, we're trained to prepare for the worst, expect the worst, and handle what you get. So departments are preparing for it to go bad. But a lot of times, unfortunately, in today's society, we got people out there, that's what they want. They're wanting it to go bad. They see police preparing for that, and they take that as an offensive thing on their part. So why are they pulling out here like they're ready to spray gas on us and shoot rubber bullets? That's not right. Well, they're preparing for in case they have to do that. The better thing to do is to have your officers there, have them on the front line, but have them where they can deal with people and talk to people. If you think it's going to go bad, you can have your riot gear in the back. And you put that on as you need be, or you have one line of people who are not in uniform who are dealing with the public, and you got another group of people in the back, and as soon as it goes bad, you roll them up. But I understand that militarized look is not a good look.
It's spooky,
and it sends a bad message, especially to little kids, and they see these guys out here with the riot shields and they're at attention and everything, look like robots. It's not a good look.
Right.
But again, they're preparing for the worst,
right,
knowing that we have anarchist type individuals that mix in with peaceful protesters. They're taking advantage of the protesters, and we're starting to see protesters stop those people from spray painting stuff. We've seen them protecting officers when officers got separated from their groups and that kind of thing. So, like I said, the police are an extension of the people and the public. So when the public steps up, the police have to step up.
So how do we improve the kind of the psychological state and the way we examine officers before they become officers, and importantly during their time as officers? What do you think can be done to improve kind of psychologically monitoring where they're at?
I don't know. That's extremely difficult because people are people. And the more exposure that people have to other people, to differences, the better off they'll be. And because we all grow up, you know, I know officers who didn't know anybody black till they joined the police department. You know, I got a black friend, I can't be prejudiced. Really? So the more exposure that people have, the better. But we can't expose officers to other cultures and other people and other ethnicities and things if we don't have them in the department,
right?
Or we don't have those partnerships with the community.
I'm thinking partially racial and cultural sensitivity training and that stuff, but I'm thinking also more generally, because it seems like the job of a police officer is a jarring job where you're constantly at threat of from the public.
You're in training. You're constantly told that a threat could happen at any time.
Right, which is terrifying to think that people live in that mind space for decades. Like you've been in that mind space for decades. It's
like a military thing, but not keyed up to that. We're just a little bit below them.
Yeah, but the ratio of on duty to training is way different in the military. Right? The military is mostly training, you know, partially.
And what I mean by that is the military, they're going to be keyed up all the time.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you're in country overseas.
Yeah.
You're over there. It could happen at any time. For us in law enforcement, it's only when we're on duty. So we at least get off duty at some point where we can try to relax.
But if you do live in the city, you're never out of that physical space where the danger is always present.
No, but what I'm getting at is you might not be on duty and in uniform. You're pretty much taught nowadays with the way society is going, with all the protests, the anti-law enforcement stuff, you're wearing a target. If you're in a uniform, you got a target on you. We, like the officers in Tulsa, just got shot. One of them died. We've had officers ambushed over the years. I can't remember the number per year, but the number used to be, 57. I think it's dropped to 54. And the significance of that number is that's the number of law enforcement officers who are killed every year in ambushes. The number's gone up. And so you're constantly taught that you have to have a hyper vigilance about your surroundings and know what's going on at all times. So your training tells you to know what's going on, try to stay in control. Now you encounter somebody that doesn't want to tell you anything and doesn't want to concede any control, and that starts to trigger things in your training as to what I got to do and why is he doing this? I don't have anything. Why is he doing this? What don't I know about this person?
But that training to be alert to warnings and trigger signs like that, is there any training to turn that off? Is there any training to decompress, to understand when you're not in the line of when you're not in constant threat? Because that seems like something that should be worked on.
Yes and no. I mean, it's difficult because when you're on duty, you're going to be cognizant of your surroundings at all times. You're supposed to be. And even when you're off duty, that doesn't go away because it's a mindset and it stays with you. When I'm off duty, if I go out to eat, I'm where I can see the door. I'm where I know where the exits are. I'm where I know where anybody's behind me, what they're doing back there. It's just it's a way you just become accustomed to. It's a survival thing, and you turn it on and off.
When is it turned off?
When you decide to turn it off.
Is that at all structured into training?
I don't know that you can. It is, but it's individually based. So that's why I say you want to put that officer at ease by cooperating. See what I mean? So if it's, I can't tell the officer you turn it off at this point. You turn it on at that point.
Why can't you?
Because I can't. I'm not there. I don't know what the circumstance is. I don't know what the situation is. You can't train that. You're never going to be able to train that, because if I'm riding down the street, I see somebody running. Well, why is he running? I got to start evaluating the surroundings. Okay, do I see anybody chasing him? I don't see anybody chasing him. I check my radio. I didn't hear anything. I check my computer. I don't see any calls of anything going on in the area. But this guy's running, so I might watch him for a little while. Okay, has he seen me yet? Okay, he's seen me. Didn't change his reaction. A lot of times if they see you, they change direction. Oh, I need to go check on him.
Right.
That kind of thing. So the same things that you key on that you might need to investigate are the same things that you are looking for to try to keep you safe.
Right, and I totally understand that when it's that kind of circumstance, when you're on duty and that kind of situation, but I'm talking more, when your wife and kids at a restaurant or something like that.
It's still there. It's just not to the same degree because you're off duty.
But see, that to me seems like a concern. That seems like it's internalizing the threat detection to be a constant.
You can't be a cop without it.
But you're not always being cop. You're sometimes being Dexter Nelson, the human being. How do you?
But that's what I'm saying. It's like, what's the best way to explain this to you?
I understand the need to be on. I understand the need to be trained in how to detect threats. But I'm worried about the opposite, that the training goes one way to see threats, but not to kind of inoculate yourself to just being a citizen when you're off duty.
It's not. You're looking for threats, but it's a constant evaluation of your environment. And you learn it. It doesn't go away. You can retire. There's some people that aren't even cops that do this. Military guys do it. Anybody that's had a traumatic event happen to them. If you've been in a car wreck?
I've not a severe one.
People who've been in car wrecks do it when they're driving. They're more cognizant of their surroundings. And
that's a quirk. That's a problem.
football players.
Okay.
You've played on team sports. You start to look around. You're familiar with where people's positions are and things. The defense. You know where the defenders are. It's that same type of mindset. You don't do it when you're on the field, but you pay attention to things.
But on the field is what you're also looking for people who are on your side that you know have your back, that won't be a threat to you. Okay. In what sense?
With everybody.
Okay.
So whether they're in uniform or not, you're constantly evaluating situations.
Are they a threat or not, or what? Because if the threshold is, are they a threat or not? I mean, that's not a.
You're evaluating possible threats. You're evaluating just the situation in general. Say I go into a 7-Eleven, I'm in uniform. I just go in there to get something to drink. When I pull up, I'm evaluating everybody in the parking lot. I pull up, I'm looking to see is there anything that I'm doing. It's all unconscious. I'm not consciously doing it. It's unconscious. I've been trained to do this.
Yeah.
I pull up. Does anything look unusual as I approach the 7-Eleven? Could there be a robbery going on as I'm approaching? Because we've had officers walk into robbery situations and things. So as I'm pulling up, I'm looking in the store before I go inside. I go in the store. I make eye contact with the clerk. Make sure he's okay. If he's, hey, how you doing? Okay. I proceed on to what I'm gonna get. I'm scanning the store. I'm looking to see how many people's in the store. I get what I'm gonna get. I come up to the register. I'm cognizant of who's in the store. I'm making sure people that are pulling up, what they're doing behind me. I pay. It's all unconscious. It's internalized.
Right. So maybe this is the difference in our lived experiences, but to me that sounds like kind of a downside that is always on, and you don't even have to be conscious of it. It's happening to you.
I guess a better example is we all do this. You do it too. You just don't do it to the level that I do it.
Yeah,
not
nearly.
Because I've had some law enforcement training and I've got a law enforcement background, you might be at this level of cognition of what's going on around you, where I'm up here when I'm off. When I go to work, I'm up here.
Right.
Now, when I get off work, I come back to here. So I'm always at a higher level than the general public because of my training. It doesn't mean that I'm looking for a threat. I mean, I am, but it's not that I'm looking to take action. But you're trained that when you become a police officer, you can take action on or off duty 24 hours a day. And to some degree, if you don't take action, you're liable.
Yeah, that's a big difference, because the moral obligation between me and you, if like let's say we're in a mass shooting situation, my moral obligation is to get myself and others
to survive.
To leave, not to engage violently. Your obligation is different, right?
It depends on the situation, because not all officers, when they're off duty, carry a gun. So I'm still doing that, whether I got a gun or not. You know, I'm still cognizant of what's going on around me. It just may lower my ability to react.
Right, with that still kind of a different wiring that yours is to see where you can engage if possible. The public's is to, or I say people that aren't police officers generally, is to maintain their own safety and the safety of the people they're with, which is a very different way to use threat detection. And I think that may be kind of underpinning some of the problems we're having with police brutality, that the seeking what you can do.
I think you're missing the point.
Okay.
I see what you're saying. Police brutality and this sense of knowing your surroundings,
always being on,
has nothing to do with police brutality. Police brutality is crossing a line. It's going well beyond that. It's doing what you should not do. It's not perceiving a threat and acting on the threat. The stuff I've seen and the cases that have been in the headlines, those aren't perceiving threats and acting on them. Those are going well beyond what they should have been doing.
Right.
Like he was no threat. George Floyd, that went well beyond that. That was way overkill. That was stupidity. So a lot of the stuff that we've seen happening to people, where people are being injured and hurt, that's not what we're talking about. A lot of what's been happening with people getting hurt, people getting shot, choked, and all that kind of thing, is officers making mistakes, and some officers going well and beyond what they should be doing in the level of force they're using. So there's a big difference in that, being on guard all the time. I know a lot of people that aren't cops that do this. It's just a knowledge and awareness of what's going on around you. Somebody that's been involved in a tragic situation does this automatically. If you've been in a mass shooting incident and you weren't shot, you were just there when the shots were fired, you will do this.
And that's a disorder, PTSD, right?
It depends on how far it goes. If it interferes with your daily living and your regular functioning, yeah, it's getting toward the area of dysfunction. But no, if you're just functioning all the time, you just happen to be cognizant, hey, I'm just making sure I know what's going on. That's normal. I mean, there's a normal part of it. There's an abnormal part of it.
I'm definitely for like being present and being aware of everything and all that, but the where that takes you is what I'm concerned about.
You could hang out with me for days, you wouldn't even know I'm doing it.
That way, like, I would hang out with you.
If you were to hang out with me for several days,
I wouldn't notice your threat detection.
You wouldn't notice I was doing it. It's something that is done subconsciously. It's a safety thing. It doesn't affect my day-to-day duties or anything. It's just something that we all do. Hell, my dispatchers do it. They're not even cops. You know, when they're coming in the building, they pull up. They're looking around the building before they get out of the car, make sure there's nobody hanging around. They come in, they get up to the door, they start their number. They come in, they lock the door. It's just little things like that. But it's not nowhere near to the area of a dysfunction. And like I said, the things that have happened in the news where people are getting hurt, it has nothing to do with that. They're going well beyond that. They're doing some of it is conscious and willful intent stuff, and then some of it is just making mistakes based on what little bit of training that they have at that department.
Right. So,
like, I can't believe that some departments still teach a chokehold, and the departments that teach it will tell you, well, it's only as a last resort. But people are using it in instances of not having to need it in a last resort. It's like a default. It's bad training. It's bad techniques. If you default to something like that, it's like, let me give you an example. Tasers. When tasers first came out, officers were tasing people all the time. It's like, why are taser incidents so high? Because they developed a reliance on the taser. And because the taser would end the situation quickly, they were relying on it more frequently instead of relying on the other techniques that they should have relied on, like talking to people or using pepper spray or having to actually physically manipulate somebody into a position. I'll just tase it. Easier. So some of this has been, a lot of the incidents that you see in the news are training related. It's officers defaulting to something because they had nothing else. So that's why I go back to the George Floyd deal. 4 officers there, and 3 of them were on top of him. That was too much. They could have handled him. From what I saw on the video, he wasn't putting up much of a fight, so they could have been handled a little bit differently. But yeah, we will train to use more people. It doesn't look pretty, but it's in an effort to keep you safe. I've heard people say all the time, man, I watched this use of force, and it was 5 guys on that one woman. Why did it take 5 of them? And I would always tell them, well, I'm sure one officer could have done it, but she would have probably been hurt in the process. The idea is everybody's going to get a limb, and you control your limb, or, you know, everybody's got a function there, and they're doing something, and it's all in an effort to not hurt that person. So.
Well, on that note, I appreciate your time, Chief Nelson. Thank you very much.
No problem.